So as you can see here, once you get your TinyPi out of the packaging, you'll have some stickers, and then you'll have to remove the foam topping here. Inside, you can see you've got everything you need to put the kit together. You've got the back, and underneath the back you've got the battery there. This is the PCB, this is sexy and matte black. And as you look down here, this is where all the GPIO connections will connect to the pogo pins that we've included. Also, you've got your speaker, and it will fit in that area there. This is the front of the case. The buttons are taped in, you just need to remove the tape. This is how the magic happens. So to stop you from soldering, we have pogo pins. All the pins you'll need in order to make the connections you require. Some plastic tweezers, and also your metal stays. This is your screws and your supports. You do have to unscrew them, and we've packaged them together. And also you get a tiny Allen key. And that's everything you need. So let's start building. You take the front of the case out, and like I said, you remove the tape holding the buttons in. And obviously when you remove the tape, the buttons might come out. Discard the tape, you don't need it anymore. And there you go, the buttons are in. Make sure you get the letters orientated in the right way, but they should have been put in properly. If you put it down a flat surface, the buttons will be harder to do, so I usually just put it in the foam here. And you literally drop the PCB straight into the case, just like that. All you have to do is line up the holes. You obviously will want to take off the screen protector. I'm not going to do that for this build video, but obviously you can. So you just need to line up the 4 holes in the corners to the holes in the corners of the case. This is the laborious part of this section. You have to take the screws out. For us, for packaging, it was laborious putting them in. For you, taking them out. Now you have to separate them from your hex screws. But once you get them all apart, you just unscrew them. They're not in tight there, so it doesn't. You don't require any tools to take them apart. You just have to unscrew them. Separating them is a good idea at this point, though, so that you've got the screws to put in the front case. Okay, last one. Let's put it into one of the corners. It doesn't matter where. Take one of your hex screws, screw it in to secure the PCB to the front of the case. You have to do that for all 4 corners. You could put it in diagonally in the other corner to make sure it sits flat and flush, but I don't think it's that important. But if you want to be super technical, you could do that. So just add the screws to each corner, secure that PCB into the front, don't drop the screw like I did. And just screw it together. You can go back around all of the Allen keys, the Allen bolts, and tighten it up later. Right now we just want to get it into position. And that's the last one there. At this point you can test the buttons. Make sure you're getting a nice satisfying clicky sound. I'll just place it up just there just now. Now, don't be alarmed if this happens. Don't be like, oh no, the buttons have fell out. That's okay, don't worry. They are marked. Obviously that one says right, the other one says left, and the bottom one says power. There you go. So it's not the end of the world. Don't worry. This is the bumper. This is the bit that goes in the middle. If you've got one of the other kits with different colours, it's quite cool to have the bumper quite a different colour. This one's all white. Now the bumper should be quite obvious. Don't put it down like that. You want to get the holes in the bumper to line up with the dots on the PCB, because they will show you where to put your pogo pins. At this point, it is possible to put the buttons on the wrong way round. If you haven't been paying attention, and you're not sure, it's not the end of the world if you do. This here is your speaker. I'm going to show you one of the mistakes that you could make when doing this. You've got your two prongs on the speaker here, and they have to make contact with the contacts on the board here. So those prongs must go down the way. It doesn't matter if it's this way. You can turn it round and have it the other way, because we've designed the board so that as long as the prongs are facing down, then it will work. So that's the position of where the speaker will go. You want to put your buttons on like this, and they will click as you put them on. What I'm going to show you an example of here is one of the mistakes you can make. So this is how not to put the board together. In your haste, do not throw the buttons on like this and think that you're ready to go. And the speaker. As you can see, in the rush, the speaker doesn't quite sit in, so you might be tempted to grab the tweezers and kind of manhandle it in there. Think, yep, that's going to squeeze in, no bother. And the other thing is the buttons on the top here. Look, they're the wrong way round. It can happen. It's an example of what could happen if you're rushing. But if you have a look, there is a lip on one side of the buttons. That needs to go down into the face plate. See the difference? That tab on the buttons goes down into the front of the faceplate. Don't worry at this point if it doesn't quite fully slide in. On the power one here, it's showing it doesn't, the tab isn't quite fully in. Just line it up. Once you tighten everything, that'll be fine. Now you can see this is where the speaker's supposed to be. You're supposed to put it into the bumper first, and those prongs should be staring at you. So put it into the bumper, have the prongs, you can turn the speaker around, it doesn't matter, but as long as those prongs are facing up the way, because you're going to put the bumper down like this. So those prongs will be making contact with the PCB below it. Then you go around all the corners, make sure it's all in flush, and you can check your buttons again, make sure everything's nice and solid. I wanted to show you what could happen so that you don't freak out if you make a mistake. Now I've got a Pi 0 here. This is not a W that I have, but a Pi 0 or Pi 0W, both can be used for this build. And you also need to bring an SD card. These are not included in the kit. Okay, so once you've got the Pi 0 on the SD card, you're going to want to grab the lid and use it as a tray, because we're going to put the pogo pins in and they can go everywhere, and that's why we've given you all the help to try and keep them in the kit, including the tweezers, which you can use to put them in individually if you like. I'm not going to use the tweezers, I really struggle with it. It's like using chopsticks for me, so I'm going to just use my ham-fisted fingers here. You need to find the round springy end, and there is a harder, it's squarer at the end, flatter. You put the rounded end into the hole, and you just keep putting them in until all the holes are filled up. We've given you enough pogo pins. We have given you the exact amount of pogo pins, so it means if you do lose them, then you're in trouble. So be careful. So you just put them in one at a time. I usually go from left to right, just like this. It is fiddly. It's not a pretty job. It is laborious, but you just put those rounded ends into the hole and just drop them in. I could speed this up now all the way to the end, but I wanted to do this in real time so that you could see exactly the process for putting your kit together. Now you can put all these pins into the tray, the lid, so that you could just pick them up, but I've got them all in here in my hand, so I might as well just keep dropping them in. It will get to a point that you're going to have to drop them into the lid. Once you get to the holes near the speaker, they can be a bit tighter. This is just to do with the tolerances of the space for the speaker. The holes are just by design a little bit tighter than the ones that don't have the speaker next to them. Just a bit more rigid. You can test them and by pressing them down and springing them, making sure they spring. There you go, they're all stuck in my hand. Right. So this is a bit that I'm talking about, just round by the speaker here. Some of these holes can just be a little bit stickier. When we were designing the kit, we made sure that there was enough tolerance in these holes so that there wasn't any problems. So being a little bit tighter doesn't ruin anything. Just something to look out for. Okay, so you might have to push them a little bit harder at this bit. Now you can imagine having to solder these 30 pins in. It would be a lot harder than this. This is a little bit fiddly, but even with me, with my meaty hands, you could use the tweezers, and a lot of you might find that easier. I just prefer to use my fingers. Okay, so that's them all in place. Obviously do not turn the unit upside down as they will all fall out. Now I've got a Pi Zero. I didn't have a Pi Zero W kicking around, so I've used a Pi Zero. So some of the features like wireless and Bluetooth will not be available in the menu once we get this set up. But everything else works the exact same. We're done with this section now. We've got all the pieces we need. We're almost finished. Now, the battery. This is another one of those places where you can get stuck. Just trying to force it into the hole there, you're probably going to run into trouble, even if you get the orientation right with having the ridge facing up the way. This is the wrong way. You want to have it with the ridge facing up the way like this, and you might be able to tease it in like this, you might be able to do that, but I would recommend that you don't do that. You grab the tweezers, you don't force it like this. Grab those tweezers, it'll make life a lot easier. Just take it and seat it straight into that JST connector. Much easier. Tweezers are awesome. We did include them for a reason. There's no real trick to the orientation of the battery here. You just want to get it into that space. Make sure it is flush. Again, do not turn the unit upside down at this point, because you will lose all your pogo pins. Okay, you could turn the battery around the other way, whatever fits into that space there. Right, the Pi. You can not really get this wrong, but this is not the way to do it. You'll see that the ports don't work if you have it upside down like this, so you need to turn it round. There we go. The micro SD card slot needs to be facing up the way, as do all the ports, and the holes need to line up with the pogo pins. There's a little bit of teasing here, but not too much. You just want to make sure that all those pogo pins have seated themselves into the holes. They will basically look flush with the board. Once you've got them, a bit of pressure on them, you see? They all sit inside the holes and they will be flush with the top of the Pi. So apply a bit of pressure there and then you can put the back on. There you go. Just close this together and then you want to grab those other 4 screws. Just making sure that everything's lining up properly. And the other 4 screws here. Now, because those pogo pins are fighting against you, you will need to put a bit of pressure on here. That one seems to have caught fine. Again, I've got quite big fingers, so I do find this difficult. If I can do this, you can do this. Now, like I say, because of the pressure of the pogo pins, you can find that the screws will just spin in the hole. You really need to add a little bit of pressure just to keep the seams together. You see, this corner here is going to be harder, especially this side where all the pogo pins are on. If you don't push it together, there you go. You need to push it together, make sure that that thread catches. If you don't give it that pressure, it will just spin. See? It just won't catch unless you give it a little bit of squeeze, just to let that thread catch. There you go. That's fine. Now that it's caught, you can go around any of the ones that you think are a little bit looser and just give them a little bit of a tweak. You don't want to go overly tight with them. But everything looks flush. You can test the power button now. Just a press of the power button and that's the light now. Check all the buttons move freely. Then you're going to need your SD card. The orientation of this, if you look into the hole, you can see that the gold pens need to face the buttons on your SD card. There you go, let's slide it in. And if you press and hold the power button until the green light stops flashing, there you go. Let go once it stops flashing. And the system will start to power up.